a foreign woman, a flint knife, a smear of blood, and one of the strangest moments in the entire Bible. God himself tried to kill his chosen prophet, and his wife stopped him. What really happened that night? Among the thousands of stories in the Bible, one passage is so brief it nearly vanishes into the text, yet it has puzzled scholars for centuries. This passage appears in Exodus 4 verses 24 to 26. At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met Moses and was about to kill him. But Zipporah took a flint knife, cut off her son's foreskin, and touched Moses' feet with it. "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me," she said. So the Lord let him alone. A strange passage. No explanation. No warning. A prophet, on the verge of leading a nation to freedom, is suddenly threatened with death by the very God who called him. And the one who saves him is his wife, a foreign woman. Why? Let's return to the historical context. Moses, after fleeing Egypt for killing an Egyptian man, settled in the land of Midian and married Zipporah, daughter of Jethro, a Midianite priest. Years passed in this foreign land until one day, God called Moses from a burning bush, giving him the mission to lead the Israelites out of slavery. But on the way back to Egypt, something happened in the night. The Lord sought to kill him. This scene seems to contradict the entire arc of the biblical narrative. Why would the same God who chose Moses, gave him a staff, and empowered him with miracles now seek to destroy him before his mission began? Scholars have traced the issue back to one neglected commandment, circumcision. Genesis 17 records the first covenant between God and Abraham. Every male descendant of Abraham was to be circumcised as a physical sign of belonging to God's chosen people. Failure to obey would mean being cut off from the community. And yet Moses, chosen to lead God's people, had not circumcised his own son. The reason is unclear, but investigative logic points to hesitation or outright refusal, possibly due to cultural tension with Zipporah or Moses' own identity conflict between Egypt, Midian, and Israel. Moses, after all, was a man of fractured identity, born Hebrew, raised in Pharaoh's palace, married to a Midianite, and now tasked with speaking for a God he had only recently encountered. The omission of circumcision may not have been mere forgetfulness, but a symptom of spiritual dislocation. God, being just and without partiality, intervened immediately. Death loomed over the prophet who had failed to uphold the covenant. No exceptions, not even for the chosen one. And yet, in that moment, the one who acted, who understood the gravity of what was happening, was not Moses. It was Zipporah. Zipporah was not an Israelite. She was a Midianite, a descendant of Abraham through his second wife, Keturah. The Midianites were nomadic and practiced a syncretic religion that honored Yahweh alongside other deities. But Zipporah understood the covenant, and more importantly, she recognized that her husband's life was now in mortal danger. Why did she act when Moses could not? This is one of the most curious pivots in the entire biblical story. A woman outside the covenant community becomes the only one who fully comprehends the sacred obligation in that critical moment. She took a flint knife, a tool used for ritual purity, and performed the circumcision herself, an act taboo for women in her time. She then touched Moses' feet with the blood, which, according to ancient commentators, may have served as a substitutionary act, sparing Moses from divine judgment. Her words, "You are a bridegroom of blood to me," have been debated for generations. Were they words of resentment? A declaration of spiritual awakening? Perhaps both. In the ancient world, calling someone a bridegroom of blood could carry multiple layers of meaning. The recognition that marriage was now bound not by affection alone, but by a blood covenant that demanded sacrifice and obedience. Zipporah's action not only saved her husband's life, it reestablished the divine covenant he had forgotten. Why didn't Moses perform the rite himself? Perhaps he hesitated out of fear, or confusion, or internal conflict. Perhaps he struggled with performing a sacred rite on a child of mixed heritage in a land foreign to both of them. Perhaps his relationship with Zipporah was already strained. Some commentaries suggest that following this event, Moses sent his wife and sons back to her father, possibly due to marital or cultural tension. Moses, the prophet, was a man of internal contradictions, born Hebrew, raised Egyptian, married Midianite, destined to lead Israelites. It's no surprise that he sometimes faltered in navigating the overlapping identities and loyalties. But in the decisive moment, it was the foreign woman, the outsider, who preserved the covenant. After that, God relented. No rebuke to Zipporah. No condemnation. She vanished from most of the biblical narrative. Only in Exodus 18 do we hear that Moses had sent Zipporah and their sons back to Midian before returning to Egypt. After the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, Jethro brought them to reunite with Moses. There's no recorded dialogue, no expression of gratitude, no psalm of praise. Yet from an investigative perspective, Zipporah was the pivotal figure who kept the entire plan of deliverance intact. We must ask, without Zipporah, without her intervention in the night, would there have been a Moses to face Pharaoh? Would there have been tablets of law? Would there have been an Exodus at all? In Numbers 12, another strange episode unfolds. Miriam and Aaron, Moses' siblings, criticize him for marrying a Cushite woman, a reference to someone from the region of ancient Ethiopia. Many scholars believe this was Zipporah. If so, it implies she was not only Midianite, but of visibly dark skin, further alienating her from the Israelite community. The result? Miriam is struck with leprosy. Her skin turns white as snow, a punishment both physical and symbolic for her racial and cultural prejudice. And once again, Zipporah says nothing. But history speaks for her. In her silence, she preserved a prophet. In her action, she restored a covenant. In her identity, as a woman, a foreigner, and a mother, she fulfilled a role no man in that moment dared to assume. Zipporah is not portrayed as radiant, not called a prophetess, not crowned a queen. Yet she was the one who saved a prophet from divine wrath, performed the covenant rite that the prophet had neglected, faced cultural, racial, and spiritual hostility, and walked forward anyway. She is like a footprint in the wilderness, quiet, forgotten, but each step she took held together the life and the legacy of a nation. We often remember Moses as a towering figure, parting the Red Sea, carrying the stone tablets, speaking with God face to face. But that legacy almost ended before it began, because of a moment's neglect. And the one who pulled him back from the brink of death was not an angel, not a priest, but a woman whose name barely appears in Scripture. Zipporah is not a central character. She left no sermons, no scrolls, no heroic genealogy. But with a single act, she preserved the future of an entire people. More striking than her deed is the silence around it. Scripture doesn't describe how Zipporah felt. There is no mention of tears, fear, or even Moses embracing her after his life was spared. That silence, in its own way, speaks volumes. Sometimes, those who change the course of history do so without asking for credit. From a modern lens, Zipporah represents countless women pushed to the margins of grand narratives, yet remain unshaken. The wives behind great missions. The mothers who guard the promise through deserts of despair. The outsiders by culture, skin, or creed, who step forward when no one else dares. Zipporah is a symbol of silent faith, a reminder that divine understanding doesn't always arrive through doctrine, but through intuition, courage, and love. A testament that God's plans are not upheld by the great alone. Sometimes, they are rescued by those standing at the edge, unnoticed, uncelebrated. Zipporah's story ends in stillness, but the ripple of her action echoes through every page that follows. Perhaps what made her great was not being Moses' wife, but knowing when to act and not waiting for permission. When the moment of decision came, she didn't look to the sky for a sign. She didn't seek consensus. She didn't pause because she was a woman, a foreigner, or an outsider. She simply did what was right, and she did it immediately. In today's world, where marginalized voices still struggle to be heard, where women's roles are often dismissed, and obedience is too often mistaken for weakness, Zipporah's story returns as a quiet thunder. Courage does not require status, and the covenant, when forgotten by the chosen, will be preserved by the faithful in the shadows.